Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to go ahead and get started with this portion of the program. My name is Marva Gums Jennings. I have the privilege of serving as the Executive Director for the Career Center here on campus, and I'm serving as a co-host for this program. The mission of the GW Career Center is to connect students with job and career opportunities. So, as you can well imagine, this conference is of particular importance to us. In the capacity of our mission, we support a variety of services to fulfill our mission, including job postings, interviews for employers, career fairs, our cooperative education program. I think you heard Ann Scammon talk about that. And obviously, in many ways, we serve as a clearinghouse for internships. We continue to provide as much support as possible to help students make the best decision in terms of experiential learning. And that is part of what we're talking about here today in terms of this conference. And many students, as we well know, are attracted to, particularly to this Washington area, to participate in some form of experience. I want to welcome our panel today. We have a wonderful cross-section of folks from the private corporate sector, nonprofit, the federal government. But before I introduce them, I just want to do a little audience poll so they have a sense of who you all are as well. If I can have a hand show, how many people in the audience would say they're representing the employment industry? You are employers yourselves of students, interns, etc. And it could be people who work here on campus as well. Okay, so a nice cross-section. Do we have any students? Great. Are the bulk of the other folks from different higher education offices? Let me see, higher education offices. Very, very good. And I have to give a shout out to my colleagues who are from a number of career centers around the Washington area. Show of hands. Thank you all so much for coming. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right. Okay. Without further ado, let me tell you how this particular session is going to work. I'm going to introduce our panelists today, and I'm going to start by asking them a basic question and may lob another one or two at them, but quite frankly, this session is for you in the audience. I'm going to open it up to questions. So after they have responded, please be ready with your questions and we'll try to get in as many as possible. Of course, I have some in my back pocket, but I have a feeling that this audience isn't exactly shy. So, all right. Ross Herosian, to my immediate right, is currently the manager of college programs and HR projects for Sirius XM Radio. He started XM 7 years ago as an intern himself, which is wonderful, and he can talk at least about both perspectives. Next to him is Marilyn Markson, who is the first vice president and senior financial advisor with Merrill Lynch, and she has been with Merrill Lynch since 1977. And she is currently on the number of boards and lives in Montgomery County. Next to Marilyn is Gail Johnson, who's a supervisory trial counsel in the Federal Tort Claims Office in the Civil Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. And I didn't take a breath when I did. And finally, not last at all, Bailey Caston, who is the Director of Operations at the National Society for Collegiate Scholars, where she's worked since 2004. And you have the rest of the bios in your program. Thank you all again for being here. We all know, and we've spoken about it earlier, that students certainly are interested in intern opportunities for a variety of reasons, whether to get their foot in the door, whether they're to hone specific skills, build that resume, etc. Sort of to set the landscape for today, and because we recognize that there are a variety of internship models, can you describe your model for your internship program talk about its length, whether it's full-time or part-time, if you're involved in any kind of academic, does it have some kind of academic status, credit or not credit, is it paid or unpaid? And that way, that'll give our audience an opportunity to understand the different models. And I'm just gonna start with Ross and go all the way back, all the way through.
Okay. It's a lot of pressure. Okay, this is the one thing I can speak to, though. So, our internship program runs year-round. We do a spring, summer, fall session. They are 15 weeks for spring and fall, and then it's a 12-week for summer. Even though it's shorter, it tends to be a little more aggressive. We bring in, it's a national program, DC, New York, LA, Nashville, New Jersey, Florida, sometimes Detroit. So we have internship, but a bulk of the internship positions are actually in New York and DC. Actually, probably like 98% of them. The other ones are one or two off. Right now, our internships are all unpaid. We do require academic credit. However, we do acknowledge and totally accept the zero credit and the transcript notation as alternatives. And I was just telling a colleague, it's good for me to be here today to hear the flip side. Because if I'm anything, I am open to feedback. And that's kind of been my story for my whole career, especially with doing this internship program, is that I'm constantly tweaking and changing and adapting, whether it's to fit the company needs or the student needs or the school needs. So I have some good things to walk away from when we start doing our strategic planning for the next couple years. Let me think here. We actually are rolling out in the next year, we hope to roll out a formal co-op program for our engineering students, which will be a paid program. We broke that particular area down because as a separate industry need, if you will. While we are a media company, we recognize that top-notch candidates inside of engineering do co-ops. And again, it's kind of a semantic thing. But engineering, I think, for the most part, the standard term is a co-op, and it tends to be a more structured program. That being said, our internship program is highly structured. We recruit for all the positions with a specific hiring manager / mentor. So when we hire an intern or interns are placed with a go-to mentor for their day-to-day activities. Usually it's a small group. We tend not to have more than 3 interns reporting to the same hiring manager / mentor. Let's see here. We have a contract between not only the students and us, but also my own department and our mentors. So our mentors have a firm understanding about what our internship program is all about, and what is, okay and what is not okay. And if they step outside the lines of what is not okay, then that's where I step in and take the intern away or deal with it however is appropriate. I know one person had mentioned before about harassment protection and things like that. We, for the most part, have an abridged version of our employee handbook for interns. There's no language of an employee. It's tweaked accordingly, but there are a lot of larger issues that are covered inside of their handbook to make sure that we are meeting their needs as we see fit. We do a midterm and a final evaluation, and really from there, I think it's an obvious byproduct of our program that we pull a lot of hires from that program. It is not an exclusivity thing. We certainly hire people that have not been through our program, but I think everybody in this room, I would think, would agree that that's an internship. That's kind of the point, is that a lot of companies, you bring someone in, it's kind of a tryout period, and that's one of the pieces of an internship. Again, for us, I think it's a big byproduct. Isn't necessarily like the key main goal. Not necessarily. We have a lot of different goals for our particular internship, but I guess that's probably about it that I can think of.
Thank you, Ross.
Yeah.
Marilyn?
Ross, is your internship full-time or part-time?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's part-time. We require 20 hours a week minimum.
My name is Marilyn Markson, and I am one of depends on the day, 13,000 financial advisors at Merrill Lynch. And each one of us can do it separately from the person in the office next to us. So what I'm going to say is how I do it, and you may have a financial advisor or know somebody who does it differently. The Merrill Lynch and now Bank of America rules require that our students be paid. We do not allow unpaid internships, with the exception of college credit, and we do not make a distinction from notational. It is a credit program. I have that, and that's a relatively new procedure. I've been doing this 33 years. It did not start out as paid internships. It's probably within the last 7 to 10 years that requirement became known and enforced. We do interns both all year round. They're generally part-time during the academic year and full-time during the summer. We have we being my business partner and I have also a personal predilection to wanting to pay the interns, because we think that otherwise we are only supporting the wealthy who can afford to not be paid. And we want to make it a big point that if you want to put Merrill Lynch on your resume for whatever reason, that this be open to a wider range of people who need to work. And we recognize that and support that. So we have always paid our interns. As a profit-making organization, or attempt to be a profit-making organization, and having been on the other side, on the board of nonprofits, I also think it's sort of, and we can discuss this at a broader term, is what's the difference between an unpaid intern and a volunteer? And is that something that's worthy to be discussed? If you're an unpaid intern at a nonprofit, would you be a volunteer? I don't know. The other question that we always do, and with the students here, is that because we're, in essence, they're part-time employees of ours, we don't want them to just be at the Xerox machine and the copier. So we try to have a serious balance between real work and scut work, and we pay attention to that. But they are not getting academic credit for it. They really have a part-time job, and that's sort of how they look at it, and we'll pay them for as many hours as they're there. We like to have them there for, we say, a minimum of 10 hours, where, because there's time involved in us in getting them trained and getting them familiar with our practices, 3 hours a week isn't going to work for us. So that they have to do that. How we get the interns, and I think this is always an issue that people, how do you get it? We have on occasion, and I say only on occasion, use the Career Center at the universities, but mostly it is from one intern to another. It is one of their jobs is to get us the next set of interns to interview. And so it is, it is that. It is not a particularly open process, though we will look at 5, 6, 7, 10 resumes and then call a couple of people in to participate in an interview program. So those are the issues that we deal with. It's a balancing issue as to the type of work they get to do. The more that they want to ask questions and engage us, the better it will be for them, and I would encourage all the students in the room to remember that. Being a quiet person saying, I'll only wait for them to tell me what to do, is not the way to make the internship or part-time employment or whatever it is you're doing outside of school be the best program for you. The idea is to ask a lot of questions of the people who are around you.
Great. Gail?
Hi. I bring props when I do these presentations, so you're not going to be able to see this very well, but these are pictures of my law clerks. I run a year-round program at the Department of Justice. This is my summer class. This is my fall 2007 class. And this is a class from 2005 that threw me a surprise birthday party in January. This is the picture that we took at the brunch. Now, as you can see, my program is a little different. than a lot of other folks. Now, it's because I'm a little crazy, frankly. But it's also because I am the product of an internship. I clerked for a federal judge here, the late June L. Green, from 1985 to 1988. And then I segued into the honors program with the U.S. Department of Justice. I externed for Judge Green fall 2004. I went to UCLA. I was allowed a semester's worth of credits because I had this externship that I came up with in a very sophisticated way. I went to the blue section of the white pages, which is the federal section. I went to the federal district court. One of my neighbors who I babysat for, I didn't choose. I didn't have to say no. And I saw 4 women listed. And I said, well, I'm going to apply to them. I didn't know what color. I didn't know what political persuasion they were in. I didn't know that one was 105 years old. I didn't know. But I applied to all 4. I was interning for Neighborhood Legal Services that summer. I decided after a week I would follow my career services director's advice, and I followed up. I called the phone expecting the judge's secretary to answer. My judge answered because her secretary was out taking a potty break. And the judge said, oh, yes, Ms. Johnson, we've been thinking about you. Why don't you come in? And so I said, Judge, I can't come in. I'm wearing a summer dress. I've got open-toed shoes. I've got no stock. He said, just come on in. I took the bus down to Chambers. We laughed and talked for 2.5 hours. She made me the offer on the spot. I started in the fall. 2 weeks into the clerkship, my sister said to me, how do you like it? And I said, oh, I love it, but I think they're watching me. And I thought it was paranoia. I was the only African-American person in Chambers, and I thought, do they think I'm going to steal the purse? I don't know. One day, I was having a bad day. I was late for work. It was raining. I come in. The judge's secretary says very sternly, Kim, my middle name is Kimberly. They call me Kim. The judge wants to see you right away. The judge escorted me into her chambers and said, why don't we sit down where we first met? She had a sofa here. She had a sofa here. I sat on this sofa. She sat on this sofa. There was a coffee table right here. She says to me, Kim, we've been watching you for the last 2 weeks. I thought, oh, thank God. I'm not crazy. And she says, Beth, who was supposed to stay for 2 years, can't stay for 2, only going to stay for 1. We've been watching you because I want to make you the offer for federal clerkship. Now, I didn't really understand the impact this was going to have in my life. I understand now, which is why I have pictures of my law clerks right in front of me. And I looked at her and I said, are you serious? She said, absolutely. And I said, okay. This is really unprofessional, but can I ask you a question? She said, yes. I said, can I give you a kiss and a hug? And she said, yes. I leapt from this sofa across the coffee table into her lap and licked up and down for about 15 minutes, telling her thank you, not even understanding then the impact on my life of that clerkship. I came to the Department of Justice because of that clerkship. I know it. I know that's the reason why I got the honors program position. My judge and her husband didn't have children, and so the law clerks were like her kids. So she was very generous till the day she died. In fact, I was the only 3 law clerks were contacted when she was dying. I was the 3rd one. So I treat my law clerks the way my judge treated me, in that she was close to them. She believed in if you wanted to have a relationship with her, you could. If you didn't, that was fine too. And so that's why these are one of many pictures. Colin Paschal, one of my law clerks, is right there. And he can tell you my office is filled with pictures. I run a year-round law clerk program. I am a trial attorney, believe it or not. During the school year, it's basically a part-time program. We have a requirement of 16 hours. Every once in a while, we'll get someone from a law school who wants to do a whole entire semester with us. And then it's 40 hours, most times 32 hours, because then they've got some kind of class component. During the summer, it is 40 hours. And there's a mixture of both volunteer and paid. As a matter of fact, when I leave today, I'm going to the Civil Division's Summer Law Intern Program draft, which is in my office conference room, where we draft the paid law clerks for the Summer Law Intern Program of the Department of Justice. Our law clerks do substantive work. We've been very lucky with GW clerks. I had this, to give you an idea, for 2010, what the demographics of my class has been. I had 2 law clerks this spring. One was Colin. from GW. One was a guy named Eric Wu from American University. This fall, I've got a GW clerk, Deirdre Ziegenfuss. You understand her last name means goat's foot in German. I have a young woman from the University of Maryland in Baltimore. During the summer, we get a more diverse class because we have a national program. So I had Columbia, NYU, UVA, GW, Harvard, University of Michigan, and Cornell. The GW student did 28 substantive assignments. It was a record. She was only required to be with us for 10 weeks. She volunteered 2.5 extra weeks. She did 28 substantive assignments. I've had 3 law clerks go to trial with me. 1 went to trial with me in Baltimore, 2 went to trial with me in Montgomery, Alabama. A GW clerk in 2005 went to trial in the Waco litigation down in Waco, Texas. We run a substantive, serious program, but it's also a fun program. This summer, I had 37 events alone for my law clerks, not including civil division events, not including DOJ events. We have a brown bag lunch program so that the lawyers in the office have a chance to talk about the litigation that they're working on. We do field trips to the Supreme Court, down to Congress, down to civil rights, where Deputy Assistant Attorney General talks to them about the practice there. We run a serious program because my law clerks come back to me when they want clerkship letters, when they want letters of evaluations. To show you the success of our program, this summer, out of my 7 clerks, 2 were paid, 2 were in the summer long-term program, both got federal clerkships, both also landed jobs at their summer firms. Out of the 5 volunteers, every single one of them had at least 2 offers from big firms, all right? I got not 1 phone call, by the way, from any employer because my evaluations typically run 6 pages, single space. Because I have the lawyers send emails evaluating the law clerks. So it's just not my voice, it's the voice of the office supporting them. We mean business in my office. It's fun, it's substantive, it's collaborative. If you want to be in a picture, there you go. Okay? So I've gone to Briss, I've gone to weddings where the grandparents say to me, "You must be Gail." And not for the obvious reasons either. It's because their grandkids have talked about me. And so it's important, this thing to me, because my life has been impacted by an internship. And so I take it very seriously. So that's my introduction.
Thank you. Bailey?
Okay, well, I don't have props, but as Myra mentioned, I work for the National Society of Collegiate Scholars, and we're an organization of students. So of course we love students and we love our interns. We only have about 25 full-time staff. At any given time, we have usually at least 10 interns, so they make up, in addition to that, but they make up a good chunk of our office. And I would say that we've hired interns in every way possible. We like to experiment a lot. We kind of listen to what our students want to do, and then we see, okay, can we make it happen? So most of our internships are paid, but we also have federal work study students who are paid through federal work study. We're registered at GW and American and George Mason for federal work study students. We have won grants before to have internships paid through, for example, the ExxonMobil Community Summer Jobs program. So we've had internships that are paid, but against sort of supplemented by sort of outside grants we've applied for, and so we've kind of bridged that gap a little bit through outside funding sources, which we're a nonprofit, so again, we have a little bit of advantage there, but I think you can also pay your interns in creative ways. We've given credit, we have internships, we're not giving credit, we worked with schools, so that students can get credit. We work with international students to go through all that process. There's quite a bit more for them, but we're willing to do that. I would say we take a really experimental approach because we want to know, even for our research and kind of what we offer our students as an honor society and the way that we structure some of the benefits of our honor society, we like to learn what our students are really interested in, looking for. We also work with employers who hire our students and list jobs through us. So I think we really try to learn about every aspect of this process, and so we do a lot of that by hiring our interns. We also have internships that are very integrated with our office. So, every intern who comes in has to interview every single person on our full-time staff. We have basically an internal Twitter feed where they all have to be on with their pictures and they comment, and they get very close to us as well. Our internships are usually a minimum of about 10 hours per week. They can go up to about 20 in the semester. They're full-time in the summer usually. We'll have somewhere between 10 and 12 interns in the semester, usually 4 full-time in the summer. Let's see. We have interns who typically our interns stay. We have to pry them out when they graduate. We have a bunch. I have one who's been here with us for about 3 years straight now. So I keep begging her to forget nursing and work for me when she graduates. But I also was an intern at our organization. That's how I started there. So I think that's actually a common experience on our panel today is these former interns. But we also hire usually about 1 intern full-time every year. And we make offers to our interns, more than 1 every year. And sometimes we're begging them, like I said, to leave their field. We just love them so much. We get really attached to them, too. So really, we tried everything. So like I said, federal work study, credit, no credit, full-time, part-time, unpaid, mostly paid. But really, like I said, for us and as an organization made up of college students, we really try to kind of learn as we go, and the way they are supervised is by me and by the person they're working directly for. They have 2 resources then, and so I really focus on their professional development, making sure that they are doing all the things that they said they wanted to do in terms of their career goals, and that they're getting an extra person to talk to, or shoulder to lean on if they need be. Sort of outside of the day-to-day work, and they also, of course, have that day-to-day supervision from someone else as well. And since we kind of force them to be social, we're not a very shy office. They really have everybody in the office to talk to, and we warn them when they come in that being shy is just not an option in our organization, and we often also use them for our video projects as well. And so if you look at our website, all the videos about NSCS, we usually force an intern to do the narration on. So you get to kind of meet our interns if you just go to our website. I really recommend our NSCS Cribs episode online. This is one of our favorite videos. Kind of shows our organization from an intern perspective. So we try to do things that are new and fun, and we really try to work with the students to see what they want. Usually for us, there's no request we can't accommodate, and I think we get a better experience when the intern comes to us with an idea. We have a certain minimal amount of structure that has to happen for all internships, but really I think we've had the best opportunities when the interns have come to us saying, I have this class, I want to do this, or this is my situation, and we typically at least we're able to accommodate most of those sort of individualized requests, and we have a good relationship with a lot of different career centers, and definitely love that partnership as well.
Thank you very much. Well, clearly interns are valuable, and thank you all for the stories, et cetera. I'd like to ask you if you could describe in 3 words or in 3 phrases the specific ways interns assist your organization. What would that be? And I think I'm going to start in the middle with Marilyn.
They know the technology that I don't know because I'm old. Stop and start right there. Which leads to presentation material primarily. Whether it be PowerPoints or really good graphing and that sort of stuff. And I can tell them what I want and they make it happen.
Ross?
Well, the first one that I guess I was kind of jotting down here that I led with was enthusiasm. So when I'm going through recruiting, and it's during a couple weeks where we have a break between sessions, it is so dead and quiet around the office. Well, comparatively speaking, of course. And then we bring in the interns, and it's like this enormous rush of kind of ideas and enthusiasm and involvement and passion. And I think it's not a tangible, I guess, thing, but it's so noticeable to me as I've done this over the years, the difference between when the interns are there and when they're not there, and especially when you have like a really engaged group, I think it makes all the difference in the world. And for me, just in this being part of my gig, that's one thing that I really enjoy about it. Like I started I think two of the other panelists here as an intern myself, and I started in a department that is not at all related to what I'm doing now. I mean, I started in music programming, and when I started at the company, I was doing on-air work for a couple years. And then this position came up to create the formal program. And I'd always wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to teach history first, but that didn't really pan out. So I kind of jumped at this opportunity to do this. And I'll never forget my senior vice president of broadcasting pulls me. He found out that I was applying for this job internally because I had to tell him. And he pulls me into his office and he goes, closes the door, and I'm like, oh God, no, this isn't going to be good. And he goes, "What the expletive are you doing?" He said, "You're going to the dark side." And and I was just a kid. I was like scared. I respected this guy thoroughly, and he told me that. But I talked to him, and this was an area, my career choice was based on, this was an area that I felt I was passionate about and enthusiastic about, and I thought I could make significant changes. So for me, it's that intangible kind of enthusiasm piece.
Bailey?
For me, we really stress substantive work. There was a law clerk that I had spring 2009, Mike Wagner, who was I think number 12 in his class here at GW Law. And Mike is a fine example, I think, of what we get out of our law clerks. Mike worked on a memo for 2 attorneys in the office. That was so fantastic. We were actually engaged in pitched battle with our client agency. And Mike wrote a memo that was so fantastic that an assistant director sent it directly to our director saying, this is our position. It was completely contrary to our client agency. We sent it to the U.S. Attorney's Office. It was their position. They loved it. They literally blocked and copied it into a brief. The judge loved it so much, it basically was his opinion. So we use, really, so much so that when the opinion came out, I emailed it to Mike and said, well done. Didn't realize you were a federal judge. But we use our law clerks for substantive work, and to me, that, I think, is all important and critical. We also, in the summer, use them for softball, which is very important. I didn't know what Facebook was in 2006. One of my law clerks said to me, Gayla, I'm putting the pictures that you take on Facebook. And I said, what is Facebook? And so I'm with her, they teach you technology. They also approach things with a freshness that's really important. So sometimes you can be in litigation for a long time and kind of lose sight of the basics. And so in 2008, I had a law clerk from NYU working on a project for an assistant director. And the director had given him the project, and the law clerk, a bit timid, came in and said to me, I think he wants me to do this, but I think it's actually more basic than that. It should be this. And I said, I think you're right. The assistant director was blown away because once again, when you're so steeped in litigation, sometimes you forget the basics. The law clerk saw the basics. And so they're really important to us substantively. For esprit de corps, they're important, and for technology, they're important.
Well, for us, I would say one of the phrases is that they kind of make our cool ideas happen. And a lot of times that we're in a meeting and someone's like, wow, we should make a video about, we actually were saying we should make a video welcoming our interns to staff so that when they get hired, we could send them this video that takes them on a tour of the office. We wear jeans every day. I know it's unusual, but our interns sometimes come the first day in a suit and then they just don't fit in. So we thought we should give them a tour so they're not jarred when they come in and that we're so outgoing, they won't be frightened. And we said, gosh, no one has time to make that video. We're like, well, we'll have interns make the video for the interns. And I would say there's cool ideas we have that we kind of give our interns the cool ideas, I would say. That is things that they're not necessary for day-to-day business, but they'd be really amazing if we had a little extra time to do them. I think that's one thing for us. Another is that we use our interns for feedback and ideas. Maybe it's a little specific to us because we're a college student organization, but they are our focus group about something, whether it's as silly as like, what giveaways should we order that like those are lame, don't order that. Or if it's something more substantive, like what kind of partnerships should we look for in terms of, you know, employers and grad schools to recruit you for their programs and, you know, offers and things like that. And then the other one for us is that we kind of create these, whether they know it's happening or not, we kind of create these ambassadors for us on campus. Because we're a student group, you know, we hire a lot of members and non-members who either become members or sort of, you know, blasé members on campus. They don't really know about our chapter, but they applied for an internship because it's paid maybe. And then, you know, the next semester they basically take over the chapter and decide they want to be an officer. And I think that it works for us too to create these sort of brand loyalists that go out on social media and on campus and love what we do, and they, you know, make all their friends join the Facebook page and everything else. For us, they really become these sort of word of mouth, you know, evangelists for us. And so that's especially why we really have to give them a good experience, because they're going to be taught. I mean, the students talk. So.
And my final question, I think we've heard a lot of it from the first panel. What workplace protections do you have in place for your interns? I think there was a lot of concern about that. Gail, you want to start?
Sure. For the department, they are treated as, we have actually specific language in federal regulations covering volunteers. As a matter of fact, we get a lot of questions because I deal with tort claims, so that means a lot of cars. I was at a seminar last year with the General Counsel for the Postal Service, one of our big agencies, and she said, think about it. Every household in this country receives mail. Every business receives mail every day, except for Sundays, unless, of course, it's express mail. She says, on average, I have 250,000 vehicles on the road every day. Well, a lot of our client agencies, when they hire law clerks, U.S. Attorney's Office, whatever, they have them driving back and forth to court, going to research sites, whatever. So we have got regulations in place as to coverage for volunteers.
Great, thank you.
We have a very long list of things that they have to agree to. The private sector in a relatively heavily regulated industry, all of the privacy issues, all of the client privacy issues apply. The technology is that for supervisory reasons, no Merrill Lynch computer can be used to LinkedIn, Facebook, Yelp, any of those. Those are the supervisory restriction of being able to view correspondence. All emails are archived. So that is so unusual to the intern world that we have to say, no, you can't do that. Even what emails they can, they're many, many block sites. We're not allowed to use forward emails or forward articles from the Wall Street Journal because there's a block in the Wall Street Journal file that says type your own message. Well, if we type our own message through the Wall Street Journal email, that's not an archived email for supervisory purposes. So we have a set of restrictions that the interns can't do. They are employees in our world, and so they're required to provide fingerprints. All of our interns have to be fingerprinted. So those are the kinds of things that we require. They are employees, and so slip and falls are covered. Bad things they do are ours to live with. So we have to, you know, and we've never had a problem with any of our interns, I would say, but we absolutely are careful about that stuff.
Thank you.
Well, since we mostly pay, we find a way to pay. So we treat them as at-will employees like all the others, really, same as full-time staff.
So for us, we, as I mentioned before, have kind of a abridged or Cliff's Notes version of our employee handbook that's applicable to our interns. There are a lot of things inside of an employee handbook that have no application to the intern process, such as stock grants and things like that, and a lot of the leave language, while we're extremely flexible when it comes to leave, whether it's sick or even if, you know, exams or what have you. So we have an intern agreement, and as part of that we have a, you know, pretty structured employee handbook piece that covers things that even may minutely apply to them, such as with our industry, plugola and payola, dealing with that, which an intern probably will never, ever deal with. But regardless, we put that in there. When it comes to the other things, such as injury in the workplace and things like that, I believe we probably have language, as was kind of spoke on to the first panel, that that we don't accept liability, but we try and be super proactive and say, all right, if there's a light bulb out, or if there's don't go trying to rewire your desk computer, please. As far as Facebook and all that stuff goes, sometimes unfortunately they can go there as much as they want, being the more immediate industry. Some of the intern assignments fall in there. So, but yeah, so it's kind of, like I said, an abridged employee handbook that with applicable language and things like that for our interns.
Thank you. Your questions. Please use the mic or, yes, that's fine.
Treat it as a job. I have two colleagues right now, Dan Baeza, GW Law, who is a colleague. He started as a law clerk. He started off as a volunteer, summer 2005. We then brought him back as a paid through the summer long-term program, 2006. He was so good, we gave him a funnel offer through the honors program. Jason Cheek from Catholic University, same thing. Fall 2005, worked with us. We loved him so much. He did a clerkship. We brought him in. I've got law clerks who didn't want to be tort lawyers, who are in civil rights, who are in commercial litigation frauds. Take the job seriously. Work it as a job. Work it as a way of networking. That's how you get jobs from internships.
I think we deal with this a lot because we bring in anyone from a freshman to grad students. So we don't, and so we could bring in someone as an intern when they're a freshman, and then we may not see them or talk to them again, and unfortunately, until they're a senior. And I think that might be part of the problem, is that students kind of understanding the before they all leave, I sit down and I talk with them about this. But the term I use is stay on people's radar. You don't have to email them every week. You don't have to email them every month. But it's important that you're a blip on their radar with some sort of consistency, because what that means is, again, kind of planting the seed in someone's head to say, oh, I got an email from so-and-so the other day, and now we have this job open. I think that's a big disconnect piece, I think, between how internships turn to jobs, is keeping that kind of the appropriate correspondence going for an intern. I think that's, like I said, the biggest challenge, and the biggest thing I think that career centers can instill upon their students is that's really important that I think students also, the one thing that they just think is like the magical end-all cure-all is a recommendation letter, which, we bring in hundreds of interns every year. I am so selective with who I'm writing recommendation letters for, and I'm admittedly slow with them because I sit down and just write them out individually. I don't necessarily have a template, but I think that's the way students think that's how it's done. But I'm more inclined to, I'd rather have someone kind of constantly kind of shooting me emails every once and again than write a recommendation letter and kind of be done with it. Even though I happen to be selective with recommendation letters, I think some people just have a template they kind of pump out and that kind of thing.
Oh, well, I also add too that they should talk about what they want to do all the time. That's why we kind of force them to interview everybody. Mm-hmm. Is we want to know what they want to do, and maybe it's not even at our organization, but we partner with dozens of for-profit, nonprofits, universities, everything. Tell us what you want to do. We just might know somebody, or maybe one of our spouses does, or our friends. I think we always tell them, talk about what you want. You can't expect us to read their minds, mm-hmm. Or to even see where they could be fitting in. We may not even have them in a job that displays their strong suits, so they should talk about it. I think there's no need to be shy. I think that's I think some of our interns come in sort of feeling shy, or like maybe they should just stick to themselves, or they feel a little intimidated, although we're an extremely unintimidating office. Even then, I feel like sometimes they seem a little shy. Honestly, they should just tell us what they are looking for, and we already hired you, we already like you, we want, I would say that is that we want to help, so just tell us what you want, really, and talk about what your goals are, and that's the best advice I would give to a student.
Have you ever had the student who came in and said, I'm so glad I had that internship, now I know I never want to do that job?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Just the flip side of why you do these things?
Yeah.
Try before you buy?
That was my experience with Neighborhood Legal Services. I did it for a summer thinking that I would do it upon graduation and didn't like it. Loved the people, but didn't like it. And so I think internships are as much for finding out what you want to do as well as what you don't want to do. And like I said, I've had law clerks who loved the experience with me, but didn't want to be a tort lawyer. But then they had expressed interest in other components of the department where, of course, I know people. And so I'm having dinner tonight with a law clerk from summer 2005 who wants career advice. She made a leap, not quite happy, wants to make another leap. And so that's from 5 years ago. And people don't understand that. They don't understand that your supervisor is a person. And so, I have what I call seasonal relationships with some law clerks. For some, that semester they're there, that's the season. I'm a part of their life. That's it. For others, the seasons go many, 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 many years. And imagine who gets the stronger evaluation. Someone called me about one of my law clerks, and I said, let me say something to you. I have hired crazy, because I do all hiring for my office. And so it's not just lawyers, it's support staff, or whatever. I said, I have made the mistake of hiring crazy. So I know crazy. And sometimes crazy doesn't show up in the interview. Crazy shows up after you get the job, okay? Then you gotta get rid of crazy, all right? And so I said to them, this person isn't crazy. What I wrote about them in the evaluation 5 years ago remains true. I know that because I had them at my house for Easter, okay? That's what makes the difference. They got that call that night for the job.
Great.
Makes a difference.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
My name's David Gregory, and I teach at St. John's Law School in New York City. I really commend the Department of Justice. The federal sector programs that I'm familiar with in New York, the NLRB, the ESC, and the Department of Labor have all done terrific by the interns who've gone to work for them. I'd like to ask the private sector for-profit folks to talk about what seems to be a very stark division. And again, I would commend the Merrill Lynch folks for paying some bucks. Now, I guess the hard question is then left for our first speaker in terms of serious, an interesting name of a corporation. You paid Howard Stern hundreds of millions of dollars. You have hundreds of interns, as mentioned, coming through your system, but they're not paid. Is that a sort of discussion or reflection from time to time to the extent you're able to talk about it?
Well, I think in regards to, we haven't re-signed Howard yet, so we don't know if we're paying him $100 million, but we already did. Howard is a proven talent. Internships, unfortunately, interns, some are unproven. And I'm speaking from, this is an issue that's very near and dear to me, because I can certainly, I appreciate it, because I know we're moving in directions I'd like to keep moving, as far as creating our co-op program in the engineering area, moving into some of the other areas which we'd previously paid, and then just as businesses ebb and flow and the economy ebb and flows, we kind of did away with. Speaking from, not as necessarily an entire industry, but I will say from a media perspective, I think the very common piece is that they are unpaid internships. And I think part of that might be because media internships, I think, have a lot to do with access, maybe even more so than experience. I like to think that ours is structured in a way that it provides both. But I think that a lot of the media side, it's sometimes a little bit more about who you know than what you know. And I think that we might even be SiriusXM a exception to the rule when it comes to having a checks and balances in place to make sure that what the experience being provided is such that it is equal to a learning lab experience. It is a training ground. It is all the 6 pillars, essentially, of the many times mentioned FLSA. So, I think on that, what you look at is if we were to evaluate and say, okay, we want to start paying interns, I can tell you right now that our pool of people we would bring in would be drastically decreased. And so I think what you look at there is something that we could potentially do, but we would be providing less opportunity. And I don't think necessarily the experience, again, speaking from our own perspective, would be that much better because we already run, in my opinion, a very good program, if not, great program. I take a lot of pride in it. So I think there, if we look at the paying option, it would decrease the pool and decrease the opportunity for people. We hire in interns a lot of interns that may never have considered broadcasting before. And because of one of the things that I spoke to earlier about enthusiasm, I try and meet with and interview every single candidate that applies for and look at talk with them at the very least. And so we actually hire a good amount of our positions based purely on passion. Sometimes it plays out, and they do this overwhelming job. This last session we had one student who came in for our sports broadcasting area, and she goes, my dad wants me to do business, but I'm really passionate about sports broadcasting. And I said, well, first of all, if you get the internship, is your dad gonna hate you? Like, is this gonna create a family tension at the Thanksgiving table? Well, 2 sessions later, she was like a shining star of the program. And I think when you look at it from a perspective of, okay, if we had dwindled it down to be paid, I don't think we would have ever been able to offer her that opportunity, because when you look at recruiting for paid positions, you look at a candidate on the basis of a little bit more of here's the job, and here's the exact skill set. Unpaid internships for credit, allow you a little bit more flexibility and breathing room to say, well, here's the position, but we have a little bit more breathing room to say, oh my God, this person has done college radio, but this person hasn't, but they want the experience. It allows us that opportunity. And, this is part of, again, being here today and having the conversation. People may or may not agree with me. That's my personal philosophy. I think for me, I fell backwards into radio. I didn't think it was something I wanted to do. I wanted to do music industry studies and found out you had to be a music major. And I don't play an instrument to save my life. So I was lost. And then I found this internship, and it totally gave me my whole life direction. And I think being able to have an internship that offers more opportunity versus less, and trying to do everything I can to make it as easy for people to participate and as open, still within that context, is kind of what I try to do on a daily basis.
Thank you.
Yeah. This may be a follow-up, so I don't know. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Ross works with American University, and our students love to go to XM. What I'm concerned about in follow-up is this larger issue of whether we rule, because I really hear your delineation of narrowing down the numbers and whereas pulling back more opportunity. But I wonder about the ethical issues of those kids who can't afford, certainly in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
We say to students, get a 20-hour-a-week internship and work 20 hours a week doing anything and live with 8 people,
Mm-hmm.
But we're in Washington, so our kids can go directly to work, and it's as if they were in a class. But in the summer, these internships really become socioeconomic, war zones.
Mm-hmm.
And more and more, we used to have 60% paid, 40% unpaid. Now the economy is 60% unpaid if we're lucky. of taking an internship in their field.
Sure.
We've,
So-
I want to address that because it's absolutely an issue that I raised and feel strongly about. When I am looking at resumes, I have a bias towards kids who worked at paid jobs versus those who had previous unpaid internships. I have a bias towards kids who went to public school and not prep school. And I have a bias now of only paying my interns and even on part-time, just when they're working part-time. So the best intern I have now, I didn't even actually have a physical interview with during the summer when he was working installing security systems at houses in El Paso, Texas, because he could make more money there than he could anywhere else. Greg's a great intern, and we're happy to pay him now. And he's working 2 other jobs as well as my job. So and as somebody who could not have afforded an unpaid internship either, those are my biases, and I'm going to build them into my program, because it's quite frankly my program, and so I'm going to take the kids who need the job. And because, to speak to your point, Ross, the work that they're doing for us is not so training specific. I don't need somebody, they all have the training that I need. So it's not that my pool is going to be limited to people who have radio. Maybe it is in your industry. I'm looking for bright kids who know how to do stuff and can, talk and walk. It's really all, and then we'll look for the other skills. But it's not something that anybody else would not have versus a paid or an unpaid spot.
Yeah, and I think, this actually just real quick, 'cause if we can try and fit another question though. It's been interesting to me in, again, not being from the classically HR area and running the program, creating the program, administering it in the past 4 years, how much there's been an explosion from what I've seen inside of internships, whether it's from career centers to students to just this explosion in third-party recruiting sites and companies and things like that. It has been amazing for me to see, as I've created my program, just to see all these things popping up. And that happened very quickly. And, I can only speak to my program. I created my program in a way that I always wanted to be, for my students, what I never had. And that was, a sounding board, someone they could always go to for any issues, any problems. And this particular event, for me, could not have come at a better time, because later on this week, I am actually having a whole day-long strategic planning meeting for how we go about with our internship for the next year, 2 years, things like that. And, for me, one of the first issues when addressing paid versus unpaid is the credit piece. Because at our current pace, we do require you get academic credit, but we accept the 0, and we accept the quarter, and we accept we also accept a transcript notation. Every school, well, not every school, but a lot of schools do different things, and we are trying to be as open as possible with that. But these conversations are good for me, because I've known these problems. Our industry is one built on passion. People come to us all the time like, I will do anything to get in there. And at times, it is very painful for me with the current structure to say, we have guidelines and that kind of thing. But at the same time, I have to be very considerate of quality control. I think it's something where I want to be very careful, because that's what the credit piece does. Like, we go out of our way to run a structured program. We need to make sure that it's coming the same way from you. And for us, that's what the credit piece does. But I hear the calls and the clamors for paying, and I think there's legitimacy behind those, and that's absolutely something that I'm certainly not deaf to.
Gil, did you want to say something before I wrap up?
We're out of time. I go to Costco. I have a law clerk. In my law clerk room, I've got a file cabinet. It's filled with water, fruit, trail mix, whatever they want. Because I was one of those students who, doing internships, sometimes had to say, do I go home or do I eat? And so one of the ways I give back is I underwrite a snack facility. But I think it's also important in law schools now, a lot of the schools, my 5 volunteers out of the 5, only 1 didn't receive a stipend from law school, and that makes a difference. And that stipend is given through the public interest law, foundations at the law schools, and so even though I'm not paying them, they're getting something. Because remember, during the summer, I've got a very nationwide, diverse geographic class, and that's how it makes it possible. The institutions make it possible for us.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to wrap this up, but the debate continues. Please join me in thanking our wonderful panelists for sharing their thoughts with us. We are going immediately into our student panel, so if you would give us 1 minute to just switch places, I'd really appreciate that. Thank you all again.
I think I want to work there.
Great job. Ben Sweeney, Jessica Sully. How did y'all do? Here. Absolutely. Ben's one of my recruits. Yeah, good luck.
I want to welcome you to this panel on the student experience. And this is a wonderful opportunity for me as the Dean of Students here at George Washington to welcome you and tell you just a little bit about the best part of my job is to meet students like this who are reflective of the experience that many of you are also working to support. So we have a tremendous group of young alumni, recent graduates, and current students who are going to talk to you today about their experience. And in a minute, you're going to realize there is nothing uncertain as we look at the heading of this session. There's nothing uncertain about the future of internships when you think about what this group of students and alumni are involved with. So to start us off, I actually wanted just to ask them each to, and we'll start with Ruben on the end, to just tell us their name, what year they graduated or what year they're in school, and just give us a snapshot of the 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 places that they have interned, worked, volunteered, et cetera, as we talked about the vast array and variety of internships that students have. So Ruben, can we just start and we'll just come down the line. Just tell us the places that you've been involved in your career.
So absolutely. Ruben Gonzalez, I graduated from the Columbian College in 2007 with a degree in political science. I had 3 internships, one at the Smithsonian Institution, Center for Latino Initiatives, the United States Senate with Senator Elizabeth Dole, the Cato Institute, and then post-graduation I had 1 internship with Apple's Worldwide Government Affairs Office here in Washington.
How are you? My name is Jake Miner. I'm a current junior in the Elliott School, majoring in Middle East Studies and International Affairs. I've had a wide array of work experiences. Starting my freshman year, I worked on the Hill for Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney. She's Manhattan's congresswoman. That summer, I worked for GW as a freshman orientation leader in the Colonial Inauguration Program. Starting in that fall, I worked for GW as the intern for the Government International excuse me, and Community Relations Office. In that spring, I got involved by starting a nonprofit in DC that reached out to kids through HIV/AIDS education, and through that, basically designed a trip to South Africa this past summer for the World Cup, and was a leader in that trip. Was a part of the fundraising process and picked 10 kids from DC to take to South Africa for the World Cup. I stayed abroad. I stayed abroad this summer and worked in Palestine. I flew from Johannesburg to Tel Aviv and worked in the West Bank for an NGO. I was an intern designing curriculum and doing outreach, stuff like that. Presently, I work for the Glover Park Group, which is a government affairs, public affairs firm in DC that is a paid opportunity, and I still am maintaining my job with GW. And in the spring, I'll be abroad in Syria. And I just got word that I received the U.S. Department of State internship at the embassy in Syria. So that is my background.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is April Walker. I'm currently a senior here at the university, majoring in sociology and American studies. My background includes an internship at Heart and Soul magazine, which is based out of Baltimore, Maryland. Also, I worked as an intern for the Center for Population Economics, which is run out of the National Archives. And I expect we'll get into this a little bit later, but I was offered an internship at the AARP that I could not accept, but I'm sure we'll explain why in a little bit.
Good afternoon. My name is Danielle Meister, and I graduated in May from the School of Media and Public Affairs. Over the course of the past 4 years, I did a kind of paid work for the GW Hatchet, where I was assistant news editor. I had a paid part-time job at Congressional Quarterly. I did an unpaid internship at CBS News 60 Minutes. I currently freelance for the BBC. I did a paid internship at Rasky Bearline Strategic Communications, and I currently work for Levick Communications, which is a crisis management firm.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Colin Pascal. I'm a third-year law student here at GW, and I've had a variety of internship experiences as an undergraduate and now as a law student. When I was an undergrad back at the University of Nebraska, I worked in the office of Senator Ben Nelson as an intern in their office in Nebraska for a semester. And then in law school, I've worked for the Federal Public Defender for the District of Nebraska, again back home. And then here in DC, I worked for the Office of the Attorney General for the District of Columbia as a law clerk. Then as Ms. Johnson mentioned, I worked in her office at DOJ for a semester. And then this past summer, I came back and worked a second internship at the Office of the Attorney General for the District of Columbia. And I'm taking a break for this semester. So.
My name is Chelsea Slade. I'm a first-year medical student here at GW. While in my undergrad, which I did at BYU in Utah, I interned with Freedom from Hunger, which is a nonprofit organization based in California, and they work with partners around the world to help distribute small loans to the very poor. I was sent to Peru and was there for 4 months and returned to work for them as a paid consultant in Mexico the next summer for another few months. I've also done work for them based on field work in India, and am probably being sent to either Ecuador or the Philippines this coming summer to continue my work with them. My first summer was an unpaid internship, and then I was rehired by them for the next few summers as a paid consultant.
My name is Matt Wilson, or I guess Matthew Wilson if we're going to be formal. But I'm a junior majoring in Middle East Studies in the Elliott School. I guess my first wasn't an internship per se, but I was a site leader for DC Habitat for Humanity. Afterwards, I worked for Senator Frank Lautenberg from New Jersey, which is where I'm from, as you will soon find from my accent. Then I worked in the Office of Strategic Intelligence at the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, where I did weapons identification. Afterwards, I worked at the Department of Justice, where I work now in the Student Temporary Employment Program, where I'm a paid employee, basically doing a paralegal's job for less money. So.
All right, thank you all. We're going to have a lot of time for questions and answers. I have a couple of things I wanted to facilitate to get them sort of priming the conversation, but definitely save your questions, and if you want to talk about some of their specific experience, we'll do that. The first question I have for them, and anyone really can answer this, but tell us today how students think about the world of work and getting hands-on experience. What does that mean for all of you? And we'll start with Matt. You have a...
All right. I think it's an interesting question to answer, especially within the context of this university. And universities as a whole. I think it's grown a lot to a point where many students, especially in city universities, feel like there's a necessity to work, where working in college is almost tantamount to a requirement for graduation, which is great. I mean, it's created a culture in which we strive to get internships, and if you haven't had an internship, you sort of feel like you're shorting your education, which is not true at all. And I try to tell kids that when I give panels to students as well, and you don't have to work, but it's come to a point where it feels like it's a really important part of going to school. I mean, I've worked since I got here, and I have not regretted a minute of it. It's been awesome. It makes it feels like you're going to college to train yourself for the real world. Like my family's from Louisiana. They all go to LSU. Really fun time. They don't work. They're gonna graduate, and it's gonna be their first time working. Me, I'm gonna graduate. It'll be like my 7th time working, and that's something I really come to appreciate. So.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, I think you made a really important distinction between folks that go to school in big cities, like here at GW, maybe folks that go to schools that aren't in big cities. I mean, I think people go to Ohio State to watch football and study. I think people come to Washington to play politics and, you know, have fun in Washington, D.C. and study. And I know at least when I applied to GW when I was a freshman, the motto was campus, city, classroom. And I think the number one lesson I've taken from my time here at GW is that we learned a lot of important lessons. Most of mine came from outside of the four walls of my classroom. And I think it really defined me as a person. Coming here, I know speaking with admissions counselors, they always talked about the incredible internship opportunities we had here. Coming from the little resources I had, of course it was a struggle, but you know, we all start somewhere. So I supplemented a lot of my internship work with on-campus work and retail jobs and things like that. And I turned out fine, I think.
You're employed. That's the most
I am
important
employed,
thing.
yeah.
Anybody else?
I'll speak briefly to at least the law school perspective. I would say that a huge portion of your law school experience is what you do over your summers and during your internships. And there are many people in law school here that know that. So for a law student, and I think speaking with other friends, other professional degrees, it's absolutely required. I mean, it's just an expectation of the culture of the institution that you need to be working during your summers at the least, and ideally, especially in a place like DC, you need to be out there at agencies, you need to be building experience, because the experience between working in a classroom in the law school environment and working out in the real world doing your legal writing and your research are, you know, such different things. The educational experience is not complete without the internships, and I think employers, hopefully, will look at look at internship experience in a positive way and really question why don't you have this? All these opportunities are available. It's almost strange to not go out and try to do it.
And if I could just add to that, I mean, I just graduated in May, and I can't imagine going through college without having internship and work experience. I mean, in terms of developing professionally and acting professionally, networking, building your database, you know, kind of learning what you want to do and what you don't want to do, internships were extremely important in the development of my career path.
Anyone else?
I can speak a little bit about the Career Center. I neglected to mention that I'm currently a career ambassador there, so I'm almost constantly engaging with my peers, kind of helping them in their resume and cover letter drafting and their first step for their job search. And I would say that the majority of, at least GW students, are very aware of trying to integrate their internship and job experience with their classroom and academic careers. There are always cases of students who have too much experience almost, and I'm trying to hone down their resumes a little bit, get it to a one-page document and get them some solid skill sets to articulate to future employers. So students are very aware of trying to have experiences outside of the classroom that connect with their academic careers.
Let me ask, just as a sort of probing question, some of you talked about unpaid internships as opposed to other experience. So talk a little bit about what you learned in the unpaid experience, internship or otherwise, and if it differs at all, you know, and how from the paid experience.
So my unpaid internship, as I said, was with an NGO, a nonprofit organization working in third world areas around the world. And the reason I sought employment or an internship position with them is because it was a cause I believed in and something I wanted to make as part of my career. The organization I worked for didn't have the resources to pay their interns, but it was something that I wanted to support, and I had the skill set to be able to support their tasks and their goals. I also worked full-time all through college, an average of about 20 hours a week, and those jobs were more not necessarily causes I believed in, but jobs that paid fairly well so that I could make ends meet and also have the means to pursue these unpaid internship opportunities during the summer and such. So I think that my motivations in seeking different things, a paid job would be more looking at the salary and whether it fit into my schedule, whereas the unpaid opportunities were more causes that I wanted to be involved in rather than for my career advancement or for my resume or things like that.
Matt?
Yeah, I found a very large distinction between paid and unpaid work. I worked unpaid for 2 years, and then I basically got sick of, basically losing money on Metro fare. I had a great time at my unpaid internships. As I mentioned at the ATF, I did some of the coolest work I've ever done, really cool stuff. But I got to a point where I realized I was doing the same work as the paid employees who were getting $50K a year, and I'm sitting there, getting zero. And I come from a place where, you work for your money. It's like a small blue-collar town, and I was sitting here watching guys do all this research, the same stuff I was doing, not getting paid at all, and I had a problem with that. So I was like, I'm gonna go look for a paid job. I specifically said I want to get paid, but I want to do good work. So I started looking at these student programs. I ended up getting this one at the Department of Justice. And I found that, at least at my job, once they pay you, they realize there's no obligation for scholastic benefit. They don't need to make me do research. I don't need to be getting something out of the work because I am now an employee. They get something from me. And that distinction came very clear very quickly. Some unpaid internships did the scholastic part a lot better than others. They knew that I needed to get something out of this, and if I wasn't getting money, I should be getting some education. Some didn't do that so well. But the job I'm at now, they know very clearly that once they started paying me a salary, they no longer have to make sure I'm having a good time. They don't need to make sure they give me snacks. I wish Gail was my boss instead of the one I got because I want some snacks. But it's interesting, but I accepted it, and especially when that New York Times article came out about the labor laws and whatever. My employer specifically was like, Matt, you're having a good time, right? You're learning things. Yeah, you're okay. You're not gonna. And I was like, no, I'm not. So it was interesting to see that distinction really come clearer. So.
I think it's an interesting question. I've always looked at unpaid internships as investments in the future, and I think, talking about the socioeconomic issues here, it's hard for everyone to make that investment. And I think the last panelist who spoke, it's about the institution, it's about finding funds from other places. I think that's what makes those investments possible. I know from my experience, my first internship on the Hill was invaluable. I was not paid, but I was part of a team like I had never been treated before. I was 17 years old, working for a congresswoman who was in charge of all these new packages of finances and stuff, and it was a brand new Congress, and it was an experience that I would have traded for love nor money. And there was no money, so there wasn't really the option. But every day I went to work after practice, and it was something that really supplemented what I was learning in the classroom as a freshman. This past summer, the two experiences I had were interesting because I was unpaid, but everyone I was working with was not being paid either. And being part of an atmosphere where passion is the payment is something that I think a lot of people can find at unpaid internships. With the South Africa trip, I had been working with peers to create this trip and to pick these kids and to fundraise $60,000. And every one of us were fueled by, this idea that this was something we were working towards and not being paid for. And I eventually got a grant from GW, a public service grant, that paid for my flight to South Africa, which was a huge alleviation. But at the same time, I still would have done it without that. And my work in the West Bank, in Nablus, I had to pay for my living expenses, I had to pay for my own flight to get there, but that's an experience. And when I'm talking about investment in the future, if I go to the State Department like I did and say I want an internship in Syria, compared to everyone else who applied, I've worked in the Middle East for 2.5 months. I lived with Palestinians. I taught Palestinian children, and everyone in that NGO was not being paid either. And so you have to, when you're looking at these things, to balance those kind of opportunities as well.
Yeah, if I could just add real quick, you mentioned two key words that I think are importantly critical and sometimes we forget about, and that's investment. It's the investment that we're making with our own time. It's about the experience at the end. Of the 4 internships I had, only one was paid, and it was like a stipend that was really more useful for the folks that travel from outside Washington rather than me. GW is an expensive place. Washington is an expensive city. Even as a full-time employee at a pretty good job, if there's anyone from Deloitte here, just close your ears, I still can't make it. So whether we start, paying interns or not paying interns, we find a way to do it. And I know the way I creatively did it when I was a sophomore is I had an unpaid internship, and I had actually more than one job. I had a total of 4, mostly because I wanted to make sure I had the internship experience, but I also wanted to make sure that I was still contributing to the community. So I was a DC Reads heads-up teacher. That paid me a little bit. But I was really smart with the other 2 jobs I had. I was a lifeguard at Health and Wellness Center, at the Smith Center, and then a lifeguard at Georgetown University Law School. I was smart with those decisions because I was paid to do my homework. No one really used the pools all that much when I was there. So I figured out a way to do it, and I think at the end of the day, if you want to, this is life, this is America, this is the way we do it. If you want to find a way to accomplish something, you'll find a way to accomplish something. So it truly is about the experiences. The last internship I had with Apple was a little unorthodox in that I was already out of school. I was already working full-time for Apple in a store, but I would really use the word weasel my way into meeting someone from the Worldwide Government Affairs Office and proposed to them the idea of having an intern maybe 20 hours a week. This is in addition to the 40 hours a week I was already working for the company. So they couldn't additionally pay me. You just can't do that. It was an incredible experience that I wish I could still do today, but I had to move on. I had breakfast with presidents. You know, I got to translate some really interesting contracts from English to Spanish. Nothing in the world would ever change that experience, even though I was working like a maniac for a week. It was worth it. It was very much so worth it.
How about, April, you alluded to something that sort of you said we'd come back to, but we've kind of touched on the issue of paid versus unpaid and maybe having to turn something down. So those of you who have had to make choices, talk a little bit about the difficult position that you're in as a student of trying to make choices that are somewhat financial, but they're also connected to what you hope to be doing or learning.
Absolutely. One of the questions that was asked earlier about how the summer kind of plays into unpaid internships, that was essentially my experience. It hit the nail on the head. Once the spring semester ends, we no longer have housing as GW students. You have to come up with your own way. And like the previous panelist said, DC is an expensive place. So I'm making essentially a few $1,000 investment for a few months of experience. And I don't have that background to be able to foster that kind of, I don't know, summer for myself. And I really was in between a rock and a hard place with turning that experience down. I was gonna be the marketing intern for the AARP, have my own office, but they wanted 35 hours a week. And I could have essentially had another job on the side, but that wouldn't have been enough to give myself housing, food, transportation, and we kind of negotiated back and forth, but they wouldn't budge, and I simply didn't have the resources. So having to turn that down essentially was quite a difficult thing for me, but I had to find paid work.
Right. Other people have been posed with that challenge?
As I said before, I held a part-time job all through college. I also worked hard to keep my grades up and was able to maintain a full tuition scholarship the whole time I was an undergrad. The money I made during my part-time job, I went to school in Provo, Utah. Rent was $225 a month. So it's a small town and it's not anything like the experience here. When I came back to DC after I graduated, I did have to take a paid job rather than looking for an unpaid internship position in a cause I felt more strongly about. I was able to find a job that I enjoyed, but financially, just in a city like this, there's almost no way, even if you're applying for scholarships and applying for funding and loans, there's almost no way to make ends meet if you're not working a paid job, I think.
Anyone else want to comment? Danielle?
Just one thing about the unpaid internship that I think that no one's brought up, which I kind of felt wasn't fair during my unpaid internship at 60 Minutes. I had to pay to get school credit for it. So I was essentially paying $3,000 to take the internship on top of paying my rent and my food resources. And I found out that there are programs that subsidize you, but I found that out after the fact. So, I mean, I think that's an important issue to address, you know, for unpaid internships going forward. I mean, how can people work on that?
Let's talk a little bit more about that, because that issue of a credit-bearing internship option, maybe if people can talk about how those opportunities have come up for you, and specifically how did that connect to your academic experience, whether it was a major or a department or a program or a skill set that you were learning. So those of you who've had an internship course or an internship that had credit with it, talk a little bit about that experience. Matt?
Yeah, I've actually never done an internship for credit by choice, because I mean, I'm working 20 hours a week, I take a full course load, and then they tell me I gotta write, 20, 30-page paper about my internship, which first off, it's very difficult to do. When you're filing papers all day, I don't know how much you can write about how great it is to have a filing system. Mine's phenomenal, but I can't do 30 pages on it. However, with one of my jobs, the ATF, I actually had to argue with the recruiter about it, because they, part of, I guess, trying to fit with the labor laws, wanted me to get credit, because they were under the impression that if I'm not getting credit, they're breaking the rules because I'm not getting a scholastic benefit from it. So that actually became an issue where she said, you gotta do credit for this, and I said, I'm not writing a paper about this job. It's not gonna happen. And eventually we worked it out, and it was fine, and I mean, they didn't get sued as far as I know, so it was okay. But I know some jobs require, I think, April mentioned, someone mentioned that, you gotta get the credit for it, and it's not always as convenient. I think a lot of internships view it as such a privilege to work for them that you will do whatever they ask. They can ask you to do anything, work however many hours, do however many papers, and you're going to do it because it's a privilege. But the fact of the matter is, we have other lives to live, we have things to do, and they don't always understand what it is that we need to do for ourselves in order to work for them. And sometimes just working 30 hours a week is enough, not getting credit for it as well.
The school that I went to, BYU, luckily made it very easy once I had my internship. It was very easy to get course credit for that. It was just like a 2-page document I had to fill out, and it was done. And there were tuition charges for that, but again, I had a full tuition scholarship, so it didn't affect me financially. The work that I did on my internship was life-changing for me, and like I said, I went back the next 2 summers and continued to work for the company. I turned all of my field data into a 70-page thesis that I wrote and published, and continue to work on developing. I've just this last week participated in a conference about the subject, and it's a huge factor in why I decided to attend medical school. My unpaid internship changed my life, and I knew that it was something that I wanted to be involved in, and it made a huge difference for me, both academically and meeting the requirements for my major, and completing the thesis, and then just in terms of my career. It was a very good experience for me.
Great. Any others? Ruben?
None of my internships were for credit. 2 of them I could have had the opportunity to take credit for them, but as mentioned earlier, GW has an interesting way of trying to get credit for an internship. It's pretty similar to studying abroad and trying to get credit from your courses abroad. I think maybe if they had made it a little bit easier, I would have tried to get credit for it, but I didn't. You asked us kind of an interior question that about our experiences with the internship connecting back to the coursework. And one thing that I found really valuable when I was a junior, we were studying research methods pretty heavily here at the university. I was in the UW20 course, and then I had the writing and the discipline courses. So we were really learning a lot about research methods. We had a lot of courses in the library, and I was able to apply those very successfully while I was at the Cato Institute. In fact, so successfully using the Social Science Index, JSTOR, so on and so forth. I'm forgetting all of them now. I feel like my career has dumbed me down. But all of that stuff, I was able to employ it so successfully that while I wasn't at my internship, I had the research director that I was currently supporting at Cato calling me saying, hey, I need some help finding this. Do you have time? And if I did, I'd do it. If I didn't, I didn't. But I mean, I think that's also part of the GW student. We talked about GW students having internships, paid, unpaid, working jobs, saving the world and planting trees everywhere. I think that's part of GW, though. That's why we're different even from our friends at Georgetown and American. And I'll tell you that employers, full-time employers, especially mine at Deloitte, recognize that the GW student is a very unique, hardworking, innovative student, and that's why we're pretty much running the show at Deloitte right now. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Colin, were you going to add something a minute ago? I didn't want to.
I'll just speak briefly. I know Dean Tiltman kind of described what the outside placement program at GW was like earlier this morning, and that is how I got through my internships at the District of Columbia and with DOJ. And from my perspective, having credit makes complete sense in the law school situation, and I would imagine in other professional schools as well, because the things that you're doing are you're actually applying what you're learning in class, and you're doing it in a real-world setting. And in some ways, it's sort of equivalent to what you might do in a legal skills class at the law school if you're doing legal drafting or pretrial advocacy or something like that. It's very similar, except you're actually sending your materials to judges. So, I mean, that's going to be a unique experience, one that you can remember and you can build on in your other coursework. And I would say also that from my own experience is that the first year of law school where I was just doing doctrinal classes, I would say that the second year where I was doing a lot more internship work actually improved my ability in those courses because I got better at issue spotting, I got better at like sort of practical application of my knowledge, which is what professors are really concerned about when it comes to exams. So at least from my perspective, it's very complementary, the kind of work that you were doing outside of class and inside of class. And the fact that we're getting credit for it is just a benefit. I mean, what I was doing my fall and spring of last year is I was doing half-time in doctrinal classes at the law school and half-time in my internship. So for me, it made perfect sense to get the credit. It just kept my workload where it was, and I'm still on track to graduate and all that sort of thing. So I think it's the program at GW particularly, I think, is very strong in that respect.
Great, thank you all. Let me just ask you one other question before we turn it over to the audience. The question is really about the mentoring or supervision, or if you think about Donald Trump, the boss that you had. Talk about the relationships you have and the network you've cultivated as a result of your work, your experience as students or as young alumni.
Yeah, I think you used a really important word, network. That, no offense to any professors in the classroom, but you didn't talk about it much in the classroom. And I didn't learn about how important it was until graduation when I was desperately trying to find a job. But I still stay in very close contact with pretty much everybody I worked with at the Cato Institute, with the Director of Student Interns in Senator Dole's office, and with Sue Cronin, who I work with at Apple. Has just been a tremendous mentor. And I know a while ago I threw the idea of going to law school, and she goes, "Why would you want to do that? You know, I come from a family of lawyers. Believe me, you don't want to do that." She was joking, of course, but I can have that conversation with a woman that I work with for 3 months. That's a conversation that I don't think I could have with a professor that I spent an entire year with, if that makes any sense. So, but to be honest with you, that onus is on us. It's very much on us. The student has to make the effort to build that, important, valuable relationship, maintain it. I think there was the panelists before that had mentioned just how important it is to maintain those relationships. It's on us. I think nowadays, sometimes we're just kind of waiting and back, okay, we've got this internship, things should just kind of happen for me. I think to a certain extent we're cultivating that, but unfortunately that's just not the way it works. We all graduate from great schools like GW, Georgetown with 4.0s, with resumes up the wazoo, but that network is really important, and those mentors I think are for a lifetime.
I also think I agree with everything you just said, but I can point to every one of my internships and find someone in each of those experiences, and I still stay in contact with them, and they've changed my life in ways I can't even describe. And internships are a lot of the values in the socialization of workplace environment and being introduced to that and thrown in as a teenager or as a young adult and learning how to work as a team and learning how to transfer the skills that you've learned in the classroom and learned throughout your life to being part of a professional pursuit. And I think, that's where unpaid, paid internships, co-ops, federal work studies are the most invaluable experiences, because you are making relationships, you are forging the type of people you're going to associate with the rest of your life and are going to be there for you in different capacities. And I can't say enough towards that. I can't say that. I can't talk about how valuable that is.
Matt?
Yeah, I kind of found out by accident how important networking was. Because where I come from, you're just friendly to everybody. Everyone's your buddy. And it's funny, it's never my supervisors that I got close with, though. It's always the other people. Because the supervisor is my boss. Like, I'm very respectful, do my thing. But then, like, the other people in the office, for instance, at the Department of Justice, my lawyers, or at the Senate, my LAs, although they are my superiors, I'd chat with them, have conversations, whether it's about football or about, their actual job, regardless. And then, you sort of I almost create like a buddy relationship with these people I work with. But then, when you need something, you call them up, and it's not as much a, hey, mentor, can you please give me some advice on this? It's like, hey, buddy, how you doing? I heard you're working in the White House now. Do you think maybe you could pass my resume along to somebody? And that's actually a situation that just recently occurred with me, with this guy I used to work with, who was one of my really good friends who I worked with, got hired by the White House. Now my resume is in the White House with a specific person. And that sort of stuff just really helped me out. I mean, I don't know if it's just I'm, arrogant or something, but I haven't had a mentor relationship with anybody really. I haven't asked anyone for advice or anything, but it's been great to have friends pretty much everywhere. Because when you work in the government, as I have, everybody circulates around. So you might meet someone in the Department of Justice, and a few years later they're in the Department of Defense or State or Homeland Security, and then you can try to get a job there, and it's just really helped me out. I guess I gotta owe New Jersey for that, if anything else. Like, there's nothing else. So.
My experience might be a little unique in that in the 3 years I've been working for Freedom from Hunger, I've never met my boss. I don't know what she looks like. We've talked over Skype, so I know what her voice sounds like. The rest of our communication, I would be in places like the top of the Andes Mountains or in places in Chiapas, Mexico, controlled by the Zapatista Socialist Army, and internet access in those areas is not the best, and phone service doesn't happen. So our communication, basically at the beginning of the month, she would call me or our team and say, here's what you need to get accomplished, report back to me in 3 weeks. And when I was able to provide those results to her and hear her feedback and everything, it created a relationship that was really built on respect of each other, because I saw what she wanted, how applicable everything was, and she saw that my work was exactly what she needed. So when she wrote letters of recommendation or things like that for me, I knew that they were legitimate, and it wasn't just, oh, well, I had to see you every day for 4 months, and I'll probably see you again, so I have to write you this letter. It was, we've never even met face-to-face. Our relationship is based entirely on the results of our work, and because of that, I know that I have her to back me up when I am applying for something like medical school or other opportunities I'll pursue in the future.
I would be derelict in my duties as an ex-law clerk if I did not talk about how wonderful Gail Johnson was as a supervisor. It was truly, her dedication to that program in particular is fabulous. She truly asked me the first day I was there, so what kind of soda do you like? What should I stock in the refrigerator? And I said, Diet Dr. Pepper. The next time I was there was 36 cans of Diet Dr. Pepper in there. So she's not kidding. But she's not the only great supervisor I've had. I was fortunate to work with Chad Copeland, who's an attorney at the Office of the Attorney General, and my other mentors as well. But I just want to emphasize how much it's really a two-way street. I mean, a supervisor needs to come to the internship with enthusiasm along with the intern. The intern is going to bring it. But if the supervisor is not on board and is not really interested, you're not going to have a good experience. And so I think that as institutions look at developing relationships with internships with different organizations that might offer internship positions, you have to look at the quality of the supervisor you're going to get, because it doesn't matter how prestigious and how fabulous the name is on the resume. If you don't have that access and the network that you're going to build with your direct supervisor or your colleagues there, it's not going to be a positive experience. So if I would say anything we could do to improve internship experiences in general is really train the supervisors how to supervise interns. I mean, that's really critical. We're not regular employees. We don't have all that skill set. You need to learn how to work with us to be useful to you and for us to have a good experience at the same time. So building that relationship, I think, is important.
Anything else? Anyone? Daniel?
I should say, over the past 4 years, the experience that I've really gotten from internships and working has really been the importance of networks and cultivating your own personal network, people you can go to through anything. I've been able to maintain several different relationships with superiors and bosses at all the major networks and media companies that I've worked with, PR firms. I think that's probably one of the most important things that I've learned aside from research and, presenting.
Let me open it up and see. We do have a microphone and we're trying to capture questions. So if you don't mind using the mic, we'd love to capture that on the audio. So do we have a first question?
Hi, I'm Kirsten Nicholas, an associate director at Duke University. I hear from employers on a regular basis that diversity is one of their main initiatives, from internships to full-time hiring, and not just ethnic diversity, but also socioeconomic diversity. For those of you who have taken unpaid internships or had to turn internships down, what kind of diversity are you seeing in those particular opportunities in line with the concept that employers are trying to reach a diverse audience? Do you think that the unpaid experience impacts the ability for that diversity to happen?
So I might be able to speak to this a little bit. My family's from Mexico. My mom's a teacher, my dad's a construction worker. So some of the networks that I think some of my friends here at GW came with, through parents and family. I was the first one on both sides of the family to graduate from a four-year institution. And GW is very expensive. I don't know if I said that earlier. Very expensive school. I think that network, that infrastructure that some people come to school with, I really didn't have. And I can tell you that I saw diversity in my internships. I may have even been selected at a place like the Cato Institute because of my background. I'm not really quite sure. If that's the case, great. If not, okay. But I will tell you the one thing that I saw when I was on Capitol Hill especially, is that you had very hardworking interns who left their homes. I wasn't from North Carolina, I'm from Illinois, but left their homes to come work in the senator's office or elsewhere. And you did see sometimes, and it did hurt a little bit to see other folks get picked for a job instead of those hardworking interns, primarily because of networks. So, I can give an example. When I was in the senator's office, there were 3 guys that I worked with who I actually thought were staff members. They worked so hard. And I found out after Thanksgiving they weren't staff members. The reason they didn't come back is because an open position in the office had been filled by somebody nobody had ever met before. Some guy in a black suit just showed up and he had the job. So I think that diversity is important. I hope it plays a role, but I think that sometimes it doesn't, and it's just something they speak to sound good or so on and so forth. But I think in terms of getting diverse people in the workplace, I think I'm a good example of that happening. So not very good socioeconomic means, families from Mexico, so.
I can speak a little bit about my peer network. I have at least maybe a handful of friends who have had to turn down internships or start an unpaid internship and then stop because they realize they can't make it. I have a friend right now who's interning at National Geographic, and he's really struggling. That metro fare adds up quicker than you can imagine. And he's working, he would say, just like a staff member would. And most of my friends are Black Americans, and we can't rely necessarily on our parents or on the university to kind of fund certain things by virtue of just not getting credit or other circumstances. But I can speak to quite a few minority students who have had to turn down experiences because the money's not there.
Yeah, I completely agree with. I mean, like connecting to what was just said by both people is, I saw a huge difference when I started getting paid as to when I was working on paid internships, especially the Senate. When I worked in the Senate, it was like, my daddy does this, my daddy knows blank, my daddy. I'm like, shut up, bro. I mean, come on. Like on the previous panel, someone mentioned that she likes hiring people from public schools, and I very much appreciated that because I got to tell you, a lot of unpaid internships, it's like the people who can afford it, the people who look like they can afford it, and the people who know, whose daddy knows somebody who, you know, knows that they can afford it. Like, those are the people who get a lot of the unpaid internships, and that's just at least my experience. As soon as I started getting paid, very diverse, from people from different schools, different areas of the country, different areas of the city, and I appreciated that, and that obviously speaks to the fact that, you know, some of us, like, I couldn't afford to work for free anymore. I couldn't afford the metro fare, and to be honest, also, it's a matter of personal pride. I got sick of, you know, working for nothing. And I think that's sort of something you see. Most paid internships, at least I've seen, or most paid jobs I've seen, is a lot more diverse than the unpaid ones. Because some people, you know, they don't realize it, but some people, just because your daddy gets you a job doesn't mean, like, you know, that's like, for me, that's not a source of pride. I'm proud that I can get my job by myself, and, you know, I'm proud that they hire me, not because of the way I look, but, you know, because maybe I'm qualified, or, so, I don't know, that's just a thing for me, but I definitely saw a difference.
Other questions?
You've all touched on a lot of different variety of like motivations for seeking out internships, you know, from like career advancement or just the experience figuring out what you want to do, and also like working for a good cause. I'm wondering to what extent you think volunteerism plays into, especially like in sort of the student culture of seeking out internships, and also at least in the nonprofit sector, what's the difference between an unpaid internship and just volunteering, or just is that semantics?
I saw myself as a volunteer with an important skill set when I took on my unpaid internship. Like I said, this was a cause that I felt strongly about, and I wanted to make a difference in it. I wanted to volunteer my time. When I returned to work for the company as a consultant, I was giving a living stipend of something like $1,000 a month, which is more than you need to live in Chiapas, Mexico. But any money that was over my living expenses, I ended up returning to the company as a donation because this is what I believed in, and I felt like this was a very prolonged volunteer experience for me. And I guess my experience is unique in that it wasn't like a corporate or a political thing. It was something that just is, you know, a core component of who I am, and it is a cause I believe in strongly. So that's my own experience with it. I saw myself as a volunteer. I'm grateful when the company was able to provide me some money to help cover my expenses, but for the most part, I didn't want to be receiving payment for what I was doing.
I guess I would just say that the internships and volunteerism in law school, I think, really go hand in hand frequently. A lot of what we do is provide, when you're working for a nonprofit or for legal aid or something, a lot of it, what you might do over that summer during the semester is directly related to social justice and things of that nature. So I think a lot of students elect to do that because they see that time in law school as their real opportunity to maybe contribute to those fields that maybe after you have tens of thousands of dollars of student debt after you graduate, maybe you won't be able to do it anymore. Maybe you'll have to go to the private sector. So I think it's interesting that law school students really see this as a time to give back when they might not be able to in the future. Now, the dynamics of legal hiring have changed a bit in the last few years, but volunteerism, just generally speaking, is a critical part of what we do, and that's why the law school has public interest programs and things like that to support students that want to go do it.
Other questions we can take from the House? Meg.
My name is Meg Gottlieb. I'm a career director for the Grad School of Political Management. A lot of you talked about a lot of positive experiences. I was wondering if anyone would both be willing to talk about maybe some
All right, well, first off, I would say I did not have one experience that was entirely negative or entirely positive. It just, as more internships I did, the more I started realizing what some of the bad issues and bad parts are. First off, the biggest thing, and this carries over to every job I've ever had, as much as the supervisor, and this goes back to training supervisors, as much as the supervisor is meant to be your boss, meant to be the person you go to, she's also the person who can fire you, the person who can, let you go. And sometimes I've had situations where I am afraid to go to my supervisor because I feel like if I start complaining to my supervisor, she's going to take that complaint as like something that's bothering her and something that's going to be cause to give me crap at work. And I don't want that. I keep my head down. I don't want to get hassled. That's one of my biggest issues. And the other thing is, and I think this was more like I wasn't ready for it. When I first started doing internships, I had a lot of times where I just sat and did nothing. Absolutely nothing. And you'd go, you'd ask everybody for something to do, no one would have anything, and you just sit there. And it's almost like some offices, it feels like I'm working there purely because like this is an institution, like having internships and offering them is something you must do as an office, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you accommodate completely for them. I worked in one office where we had 8 interns in one cubicle. One cubicle. I'm a big dude, all right? And like, that was not cool for me. And the whole time I was sitting there, like not doing work, crammed into this thing with all these people, and I was like, why am I here? And I realized like this office has internships, not necessarily because they need them, but because they feel like they're supposed to, because all of these offices have them. And that's probably my biggest issue I've had, and it can't be fixed because, to be honest, I still wanted the internship, I still wanted it on my resume, and I suffered through the cramp and the sweat and everything else of that little tiny cubicle, so,
I can say that the only negative experience I had, and it wasn't really even a negative experience, was one that I described earlier, where you saw kind of hardworking people passed up for maybe, a political favor to somebody. And it wasn't necessarily a negative experience, it was a learning experience. I mean, internships are about learning. People apply and pursue internships for an experience that they hope they'll be able to use when they graduate or apply for graduate school. And I would say, as a consultant to the United States government, we are still shoved in cubicles. And as a consultant to the United States government, I still can't afford to take the metro. So maybe it's more speaking to the cost of living in this city or the cost of working in this city. I don't think it's unique to an unpaid internship. I would say it's part of the experience, though. And it's on the onus of us to make the most of those experiences. And as with a bad job, sometimes you get them. There are bad internships out there. But I think that's why I had 4, because I wanted to make sure I at least got 1 or 2 really good ones. I lucked out. All 4 of mine were great. So anyone here who's interested, I'd be more than happy to put you in touch with the right people.
I think it's important for people who are seeking interns, companies who are doing so, to be very clear about what the intern will be doing. I remember going for an interview for an internship once, and it was about electronic medical records, and I thought I would be helping design policy and all these cool systems to help medical practices adopt electronic medical records. During the interview, they showed me the space we would be working in. It was a room filled with patient files, and it had a scanner. And after the interview, they told me, go sit back down in the waiting room and we'll tell you when we've made our decision. And I walked out my interview and straight out the door because I knew what I was going to end up doing if I took that internship. I was going to sit there and scan papers for 8 hours a day. And that wasn't what I wanted to do. But it's important that employers be very clear about what their internship's responsibilities will be. They need to be honest with people that they're going to hire, or not hire, I guess, if you're not paid, but take on in that position.
Any other horror stories from the field?
Just to go off what she said real quick. And also, there's a distinction between what you think your office provides and what your office actually provides. Because I've had internships too where they're like, oh, it's a great job. You're going to be helping writing briefs and memos and doing all this stuff. And it's like, well, that's maybe what you created, but that is not what is practiced. Like, I don't know, maybe talk to the interns or something, but that's the worst thing, is just when it's misleading and you show up and you're expecting to, help craft policy because you're stupid. And then you get there and you don't do anything. So, I don't.
We probably have time for one more. Go ahead, right here.
I'm Julia Meyer, I'm a career coach at the LA School of International Affairs, and I think that there have been more and more unpaid internships out there because of the state of the economy, but there's more and more full-time unpaid internships, working 40 hours a week, no pay. I was wondering how many of you have heard of others who have colleagues, if you've ever done that, if you could share a little bit about your experience.
My the company or the firm I work for right now has an incredible internship program. I mean, they roll the red carpet out, both for undergraduates and for the graduate MPP, MPA students that are interning. And part of me says, wow, I really wish I could have started at Deloitte with this phenomenal student internship, because they travel, you know, they're working on client projects, they're getting all sorts of job training. And I think that's, you know, for the folks that reach out and find that internship, it's a great opportunity. And again, maybe it would have been nice to do something like that. But again, I don't think I would trade the experiences that I had in my unpaid internships or the one paid internship for it, because I still learned something from them. So, the one thing I think we haven't talked about are the little things we didn't learn from our internships, aside from the on-the-job training, or even if you were that person who had to learn how to use a scanner that day, are the things like business etiquette, demeanor, how do you talk to people? These, you know, we're rolling out of bed sometimes at 8 a.m. to get to our 7:45 class, and you show up in sweats and backwards cap. You know, our internships during college are a great time to learn those other nice to knows when you go in for your first professional interview. And I'll tell you that the folks that I work with who didn't have internship experience at all, paid or unpaid, you know who they are. You know who they are when they walk. Even the ones that are graduating from Columbia with MPPs and MPAs, real nice folks, but you know who they are. Not a bad thing, but you know, just something to keep in mind.
Any other?
I know from personal experience with my friends and colleagues at law school that I have many people that I know that have worked, you know, this past summer and the summer before that for 40 hours a week doing substantive legal work and have not been paid for it at government agencies or at nonprofits. I mean, you have to do it. I mean, it's just part of, again, the culture of our institution is that you have to work, and if you don't work, employers wonder why. So you will go to any length. You'll run up your credit card as high as you need to run it for the summer, and you're gonna get out there and work. And that's just, you know, the sacrifice we make and the decision that you know, we make as students to do that. You know, again, there are programs and stipends that you can get, but it's not for everybody. Not everyone can get those. I mean, I had one my first summer, I didn't have one my second summer, and I didn't get paid my second summer, so I had to go get a research assistant position to sort of pay my rent, my metro fare for that summer. And so even for, you know, folks in law school or other professional schools, those pressures are intense, and you just have to accept it as the price of admission, I guess.
My internship was obviously 40 hours a week. I didn't commute to Peru daily. But and this was at a time when I was living in an area where the rent was, as I said, $225 a month. And if I were living in an area such as DC, where the rent is so much more than that, that would not have been financially possible for me to do a 40-hour week unpaid internship unless I had some other form of financial support, whether that was money I'd worked very hard to save, or whether I had another part-time job on top of it, or whether it was parental support or whatever it may be. It's financially just impossible for a lot of people, I think, to take on something like that.
I mean, I talked about the great experience I had this past summer in the West Bank, and it was an amazing experience, and I was living it. It wasn't, and it goes back to the previous question, I was volunteering, I was living, I was working, I was interning. It was all kind of wrapped up in one. None of that would have been possible without having to seek out other ways to afford it. I come from a very similar background as these two. I couldn't afford it unless I found opportunities from this institution and from outside scholarships that would support individuals going out and pursuing these passions and pursuing these opportunities that really are life-changing. And I think that's a big part of it.
That definitely speaks to my dilemma quite a bit, and I think what we need to note is that the investment you make in these unpaid internships has to be made up front. If I was to have worked simultaneously with my unpaid internship, I'd get a check, obviously, every 2 weeks or every week. But to live somewhere, you need money up front. And if I don't have money up front, I can't do that. So it really comes down to what you have when you get the opportunity. And if you don't have a couple $1,000s to hand over to live in Foggy Bottom, then you're kind of out of luck.
I wanted just to say we have an opportunity. Most of them will be able to join us. Some of them have to go back to work or internships. But this is an opportunity when we break for lunch for you to talk with them, and I'd encourage them to sort of spread out. And as we go over to the Marvin Center, which is directly across the street, we'll have an hour together. You can certainly talk with each other, but also I'd encourage you to take advantage of the time with these students and alumni. And with that, I'd just like you to join me in giving them a round of applause for sharing their experiences.